Ladies and gents, this is the moment you've been waiting for. A podcast for podcasters. This is Creating the Greatest Show, and I'm your host, Casey Cheshire. Join me as we interview podcast hosts and investigate the ingredients of a successful interview podcast. We'll talk mistakes, earned skills, powerful questions, and more. This show is sponsored by Ringmaster, completely done for you B2B podcast production. Cool. We hit the button. And I got to tell you what, get freaking ready for this episode. We're going to have so much fun. But also be prepared because I brought coffee, Celsius. In fact, I have 2 Celsius cans. I don't know what's going on here. I've got some Gatorade. I am ready to rock this thing, and you need to be ready to listen to this thing because our guest is an absolute terror. She is amazing. She's terrifying how many things she knows, and we're going to talk live events today. We're going to talk about a lot of different aspects. I know a lot of you have been thinking, hey, I got a podcast. Why don't I just make it live? Yeah, that's a great idea. And we're going to talk to someone who like lives and breathes this stuff. She's an expert in this area in digital events and strategy, all the things. Man, live events, 24/5, multiple live events all going on at the same time in different places. She's got a great show called Donuts and Demand. That is the coolest name ever. The name all of us instantly wish we had invented when we hear it. Associate Director of Content and Campaigns at Goldcast, Lindsay McGuire. Welcome to the show.
Hello. What a intro. Thank you. But also, I don't know how you handle that much caffeine because I always joke, my caffeine cutoff's 11 a.m. If I even drank 1 Celsius, I'd probably die.
Well, why don't we find out on your next live webinar? We'll send you a Celsius and we'll see what happens. No, maybe not. Maybe not. We'll stick to donuts. Well, you know what? I am a mere shadow to Mr. Chris Walker, who when I was having him on my podcast, he was drinking a cold brew on the show, right? And I don't know if you probably know this. I'm like a dumb and behind. I didn't realize that cold brew had more caffeine than regular coffee. So when I saw him drinking that, I was like, oh my gosh, Chris, that's insane. He's like, yeah, I already had 3 before the show too. So I don't know how he does it. I still this day, I don't think he still remembers chatting with me. I think I was just he blinked.
I mean, maybe that's the key to his success. I don't know.
Maybe. Well, Lindsay, I want to start this show by asking you the question where I ask everyone this question to start this show off. We got a lot of podcasters listening, a lot of hosts listening. Can you pull back the curtain for us on your live events and share your most important strategy for a great show?
Yeah, man, what a loaded question right there.
Yeah.
I think what it comes down to it is producing content your audience wants to see, right? I think as marketers, many of us fall victim to producing the content we want our audience to digest and see and hear, but that's not going to be very serving in the long term. So being able to understand what your audience actually wants out of your live events, out of your podcasts, out of your content. And that's why I love live events because I can literally ask my audience on the show, what do you want to hear about? What do you want to learn about? Who do you want to be a guest on the show? Do you want to come on the show? So I think it's all about trying to figure out how can you stand out from the crowd? How you can break through the noise, the thing we've always been talking about, especially as digital marketing, podcasts, live events, all the things get more and more cluttered and clustered and just everyone has everything, right? But then also being able to understand how that ties back into what your audience is looking for, what they're craving, what they're needing. But that doesn't mean it shouldn't relate to your business and your strategy and what you're doing as an organization, right? There should be a balancing point between creating what your audience wants, what's going to fill gaps in their kind of content, pegboard, I guess is a good way to say it. But also, how can that then tie back to what you're bringing to market, what products you're working on, what features are new? So being able to balance between what people are looking for, what's going to catch their eye, because you got to catch their eye first, right? You got to have that moment of pizzazz. But then how does that also correlate back to your org, your strategy, your go-to-market, all those kind of things?
Got it. So you start with the audience and then tie then back to you first. But I mean, I'm guilty of this. I've been very selfish in some of my podcasts where I'm excited to talk to someone and I I can lose myself in conversation and forget about the audience. I can forget that anyone's listening, which helps if no one's listening, right? But when they actually are, then you need to think about them. How have you just always felt this way? Like, how do you make the shift? What kind of things have to go through your mind in order to put your audience first or at least out there?
Yeah, it's just knowing at the baseline that's what's going to keep you going is the fact that people are invested in your brand, in your show, in your episodes, in your content. And that's not to say that you have to amass some mega audience. I think a lot of people go into either creating a live event series or creating a podcast thinking that they need to amass this huge audience and have thousands or hundreds of thousands of listeners and people engaging. But the truth of the matter is it's actually more important to have a very, very engaged audience, no matter their size. So it's better to have a very engaged audience of 500 versus, a not engaged audience of 1,000 or 2,000. So just getting that mindset. And sometimes it's hard because you are going to have probably managers or leaders or business associates or whoever insert into that space who's going to be telling you like you need to grow this show and you need to grow the audience and we need more and more and more and like the economies of scale. But you need to really think about, well, what is the point of what I'm doing? What is the goal? What's the value? What's the return? And that can be different across depending what kind of show you're running, what kind of investment you're putting into it. So there's a lot of like balancing and like mathematician kind of things happening. But
But tying it back to, like, what the goal is, so because otherwise you get lost in those vanity metrics. So it sounds like even with a live show, you still have outside resources or outside influences saying, how many likes did you get? How many bodies clicked and joined your
always.
event?" Right? And we always everyone oh, it's like a disease. It's like, "Go away." It's not about that, but it's about the engagement and your why is that? Why is it more about the people engaging? I feel like the answer might be obvious, but I feel like I need to ask this question too. Why is engagement more important than just the fact that you had, 1,000 people there?
Yeah, to me, that engagement is really pointing out that you're developing a relationship with that person, right? Like they are taking the time to actually engage. It's one thing to be a passive listener. And like if you're, on a live event and you're not engaging in any opportunity, like you're not chatting, you're not doing polls, you're not doing Q&A, like you're just a passive listener. And the same thing as like a podcast listener, you can be a very passive listener. You can be like one quarter listening while you're doing laundry or washing your kid or working or whatever it might be. So to me, being able to pick up on those engagement signals and those people who are truly invested in the content you're putting out, that's opening a door to that relationship. And like for instance, one thing I like to do in my live events is plug in polls that give me a reason to talk to my audience. So for instance, on our series masterclass, our last one was talking about how to maintain your show momentum, grow a show into a thriving series over time. One of the things that came up was talking about booking speakers and booking guests. And so one of the poll things was, hey, do you want some examples of some guest outreach to help you start your series and start your show? Anyone who said yes, guess what? Now the door's opened for me to like reach out to them, provide them some very helpful, relevant content, and hopefully begin some kind of relationship between show host and show participant, show viewer, audience member. So I think there's just ample opportunities to be able to build some of those more in-depth long-term relationships. And if they're like, oh, hey, Lindsay from Goldcast is super helpful. She was super nice. Like got a lot of value out of the stuff she's creating. Then if they ever need a live events platform, guess who they're probably going to think of? Goldcast. So I think that's the really
Right.
value there of leaning into that importance of engagement and who is actually, invested in what you're doing.
Yeah, and we're gonna talk about Goldcast in a little bit. I actually loved my experience. I had a chance to join you on your show. Well, not join you. I got a chance to like observe, watch, and next time I'm bringing donuts, and I mentioned that. It was great. So we're gonna share a little bit about some of my favorite features about it, and if people haven't checked it out, they're gonna want to after that. But to follow up with what you were saying, it makes total sense, and I hadn't really thought about this. The engaged people are on their path to building a relationship with you. Yeah, the people just passively listening are also. I mean, I've listened to 100 million hours of podcasters, and I feel like I have a relationship with them. They don't know who I am, of course, but that developed a lot slower than if I was like actively engaging. And oh, there's nothing quite like the host or that person engaging with you, and you're like, whoa, this is cool. So yeah, it's like it's a great signal. And I think marketing, we have so many dumb signals that don't mean anything, you know? And so, but this is a
Oh,
real
don't
signal.
send
This
me
is like,
down that road.
oh, right? That's a rant for the other show. All the bullshit marketing out there. But no, this is like a really good signal. This is, not only did I show up, but I'm not like getting other work done. I'm like, I'm in this content and I'm excited. I want to hear more. And the feedback that comes from that. You know, when you mentioned the polls, I was like, okay, this is cool. We're gonna make better content live while it's happening. But you mentioned it gives you permission to follow up with people afterward. So I'm kind of digging this polls thing. Do you have them in every one of your shows?
Yeah, so for every episode of Donuts in Demand, which is our hour-long show run for demand generation marketers, we run, generally speaking, 3 polls, one in the kind of intro housekeeping section, one about midway through, and then one closer to the end, and they're always related to the topics we're talking about, the content we're putting out there, not just, like, sporadic random ones. I mean, every once in a while, I'll throw out a fun one about, like, donuts or things like that because we are a fun show. We are
You
lighthearted,
gotta have
and so
fun.
we
Yeah.
want to have some sprinkles of the fun popped in. But they are strategic in ensuring that we're serving our audience, that they can get more content or more information, or we can then use that information to cater our future episodes and be able to know, like one of the polls I ran during our December episode, which had Brendan Humford of Growth Sprints and Joyce Strong of DocuSign on, was, hey, what do you want us to cover in 2024? Gave them 5 options. Vote on your favorite, or you can drop a comment in the chat if what you want to see is not there. And it's just
Right.
so valuable to have that and know exactly what people are looking for. But yes, always have polls. They're super helpful, both I think for the audience and for myself and the Goldcast team as we curate our content over time. And they're just fun too, you know? And then we can also use that to fuel other pieces of our content strategy. We can take that poll and use it in research. We can use it in social media. We can put it in email nurture. So it's kind of this full cycle fueling everything else just from like a simple poll in a live event. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. Oh, there's like so much with that. The the polls, they have a chance to be fun, like you're mentioning, but also give you that real feedback. And not that we want to rant about marketing again, but back to your original point. So many times we make content, show or not, based on our own guesswork, or make content. Hey, I spent thousands of dollars on this white paper that no one wants to read because you decided that your people need to read this and no one actually gave you that feedback. So to be able to actually ask people in these polls, hey, what do you want to hear more of? And they tell you, man, just make your content strategy that. Stop trying to invent things for your people. Like give them what they want. Incredible. You've definitely done this live event thing a lot. Would you break it down? Like what are the key things what makes for a great live show? And have you experienced the difference? And what in particular do you gotta like watch out for, but also you can really double down on?
Yeah, what makes a great live show is just the energy around it. There's just a different vibe when you know it's live, and there's a little bit higher stakes
Totally.
too, right? Like there's no
Yeah.
editing, there's no, cut tool, there's no like guess you can cut to commercial depending how creative you are, but I mean there's a whole nother level definitely of stress that comes along with live events. And I never understood it until I became an event marketer. I was like, oh, this is what my event marketing friends are talking about. Like, oh, this is a whole new level of like pressure, but I also think that level of pressure makes you better because you feel like you have to nail it the first time around and you don't have, 5 takes to get it perfect. But it also brings
Yeah.
like a level of like authenticity too, where you can be not as polished and perfect and a little bit more relatable. And I think as a whole, that's where marketing is going, is that we want those really authentic, personal, like relatable hosts and moments and feelings. So I think that's the magic of a live event. And then also just the vibes, right? Like You have people popping off in the chat. You can be able to capture kind of real time feedback in your polls. In Goldcast, we have fun things like a ticker that we pull up. So when I intro my guests, there's a ticker that says, connect with them on LinkedIn. And there's just fun things that pop up that make it kind of engaging, and that I'm very much a believer of like surprise and delight, especially when it comes to product development and what is built in your product. And one thing we've done as far as our surprise and delight for Donuts in Demand, which I guess it's not that surprising if you're a repeat like viewer and audience member, but for first timers, for each of our segments, we have a really cute, just little animation that comes up and it intros the next segment of our show. And just having those moments of surprise and delight, and people just, and the guests too, because obviously my guests are on camera, and a lot of times I see them light up because they don't know it's coming and they're like, oh, that was fun and cool. And so you have those moments of just being able to have that surprise and delight built into your shows, and being able to get that reaction live, both from the people who are on camera, but also people in the chat. People who are very engaged will react to those kind of things. And so there's just another level of pressure, but also a level of like excitement and energy that I don't think you get from a lot of other mediums.
So true. And you were causing me to really reflect as you were talking about that live feeling. And maybe it's the theater background or something, but I tend to always treat my podcast as if they were live. Like, you're totally right. I could say, I could fix my chair here and I could say, "Hey Bjorn, let's cut this part out. Let's actually, Bjorn, let's not cut this part out." But like I could, you can do that. Or you could say, "Please, actually, Bjorn, let's summon lightning for everyone from the tip of my finger." Yeah, like, you can make things happen. You could break that fourth wall, but for some reason, just, whether it's my experience or background or training, I tend to treat this like, oh, I don't really want to break character for you or for anyone listening, but you totally can. And no one's the wiser, right? But on a live on a live show, you don't have that. It literally is one take. It's almost the difference between watching a TV show that's filmed live versus one that isn't, and it's just like, something happens, it happens. But sometimes the magic happens in those moments. And there is more of an atmosphere of like, whoa, this thing's going on. Because you get the feedback, right?
Mhm.
Like, if we screw up or something and we just let it ride, that's cool. And we're not going to know about it until a couple weeks from here. And, oh, hey, funny podcast. That was crazy when Casey said XYZ, or, what a weirdo, right? But like, to get that instant feedback of like, you said what? Like, LOL. The chat was blowing up when I was in the Donuts in Demand. It was fun. I was like, I love causing trouble in a chat. So you were out there, you're interviewing, you had 2 guests, and it was just fantastic. And I'm like causing trouble. I'm like, oh, this is great, just giving feedback. And I love that when your audience is giving you feedback. So makes total sense. And then finally the surprise and delight. Yeah. Yeah. I did notice those screens on Goldcast where it was like you finished with one particular section or a series of questions, and all of a sudden it was like splash screen. I'm like, whoa, what is this? Like, I've not seen another platform do that.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it gives us another layer of like creativity and surprise. And, I think after a while, people get tired of kind of a panel or talking heads or just people on mics. And so having those like little breakup moments, it just brings that
Yeah.
energy back to life, right? If it's starting to kind of dull a little bit.
Totally. What are you trying to say about my show? Is that what you're trying to say?
That was
I need to get
nothing
this
personal.
this sad show live? Probably. I don't know if anyone could handle it live though. We have to filter it for you all. It's too powerful. Um, so man, you mentioned before we got started that you have a horror story. And I didn't want to start with it, but man, do we love a good horror story. So what happened?
Oh, wow. I have a few. Some from my time podcasting, some from my time with
And
live
and
events.
hold on. Splash screen. Horror story. Horror stories. Okay, cool. Now we can begin.
Okay, awesome. Loved it. You should do that all the time. Like, I think people would pay you for
I
those. Put
should.
them on Fiverr.
I think so.
I think I'll go with my live event one, since that's the world I live in now. But
Yeah, please.
one of my events, we just could not get one of the speakers to do a tech check. Y'all, please, for the love of God, always do your tech checks. Like, just do it. Just do it. Just please, 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 begging you. Um, Someone didn't do a tech check. They were also not using, as a streaming platform, it's just always recommended to use a desktop computer and use a computer. It can work across mobile units, but it's just not the favored platform to use for things like that for a myriad of reasons. Not only did they not do their tech check, they also used a mobile device and could not.
Like, on an iPad setup. Man, those people drive me bonkers. "Oh, I've got my iPad, my" God, people.
And, yeah, things went a little off the rails and, we had to handle that situation, and someone had to go live who was not planning to go live and kind of start the
Oh, tell me
event.
I need more details, though. You said something went what happened? Tell me the gory details. Like,
Um,
they couldn't connect or they were, like, on?
they just, like, could not get it figured out, and we were trying to, like, figure it out backstage, and then also having someone, like, run the event that wasn't even supposed to be running the event at that time, and it was just, again, it's that amount of pressure and stress that comes along with live events, but at the same time, like, it is so worth it to go through those moments because after that, we had some people ask just to suss out, like, could people tell that this went this far off roads? Because, like, we were all very stressed and very like, oh God.
Yeah.
But amazingly, people did not even pick up that that wasn't how the show was meant to go, and that it went. They just assumed that's how it was supposed to be, and I think there's also magic in being able to recover when things go off or things go awry, and being real and open and just kinda going with it in those moments, I mean, that's when magic happens, I guess.
Hell yeah. You know what? That is such a huge thing you brought up, the fact that and I love that you have the polling to be able to see you have the feedback back to everything you've been saying, and you asked, like, "Could you tell how much of a cluster that was?" People are like, "No." And, like, you hear this from acting coaches and other people, like, if even though in your brain, you're living 3 lifetimes of your brain going, "Ah, this is not working," right? You're like in Inception, you're like in 3 dream levels, and it's but, like, no one else noticed, like, for everyone else, it was, like, 1 second of, like, "Oh, Casey paused to think about something real quick," you know?
Yeah, if you
Ah,
all want a funny one, I actually will be dropping a blooper reel from not a blooper reel, it's just one blooper clip, but I have one really great clip of where I just stumble and keep stumbling and awkwardly keep stumbling, but, you just have to recover and you turn it into something funny, and now it's a great moment for me to share on social, so, Logan, Belinda, Travis, thank you on the series masterclass for leaning into that moment and making me not feel more terrible than I already did. I could not
thanks,
say the
guys.
word distribution, and it just, like, snowballed from there.
Is that the word? Can you say it now?
I can say it now, I've overcome my
You
fear.
say it,
Distribution.
like, 3 times fast?
Distribution, distribution, distribution. See, I got it now because I messed
That's
up
awesome.
live.
For me, it's accelerator. I don't know, it just accelerator, and I some of the R's just get dropped in there, I don't
A
know
lot of
what it
lot
is.
of, syllables in that word, so
Yeah, I know. That's another topic we can get to, but, shoot shoot, to go back before we get into the words and whatnot, the tech check, right? I call it a prep call. Whether it's a prep call or a tech check or something, do you now make people do it, or do you still let them do that after that experience?
I mean, in an ideal world, yes, everyone will do a tech check, but
Right?
sometimes just things come up and things are awry and schedules, and especially with people who are very, very busy, just every once in a while, it just doesn't happen. And you just have to be prepared. And I think that's why, though, too, you just need to know what's backup plan B, C, D, E, F, because you never know what might happen. And so just knowing that could happen and being okay if that happens and not letting that break you because easily you can like spiral and you can just like lose your cool and things just crumble and all of a sudden you're like, "Oh no, this is all just garbage now." But again, like there's that moment of authenticity and you can find ways to maybe make it funny or like, somehow get the audience engaged. Another tactic too, like if it's really like, "Oh no, we can't start," or like we need to delay or something, you can always too in Goldcast, like bring up an audience member on stage and do something like fun or like interesting or engaging. So there's things you can do to pivot when you need to. And of course, as an event marketer, you don't ever want to like have to make those pivots, but just know it might happen. And you just have to be in the mindset of We'll just make it work. You know, if anyone's a Project Runway Tim Gunn fan, just gotta make it work.
Make it work, people. Make it work. He's great. Great dresser, and he's got these awesome catchphrases. I like to bottle him up, that's for sure. Uh, yeah, you know what? Even hearing this convo that we're doing, like, if someone's listening to this, just giving you the heads up, weird stuff happens. So if you can plan for it, learn from our horror stories, now you know. Like, what happens if the fire alarm goes off in the middle of your podcast? Have you thought about that? I One of the podcasts we produced, we had a naked man walk across the background of it. Uh, he thought his wife was doing a audio only podcast,
Oh,
you know?
no.
So what do you do? But you listen to a show like this and you hear these situations. So maybe your brain goes, okay, if that happens, what am I going to do? Just a little bit of planning. I love the idea of bringing a member on stage, and you could totally have that as like a fallback. Maybe in the moment you just invent it, but later on you go, okay, our plan, like to your point, our plan B is this. We're going to do this until everything's ready to go. And again, to your poll, no one will even know. They're like, that was the coolest show ever. Like, that's the sad part. When like, they're like, that was my favorite show. And you're like, wow, wow.
And if you
The
need
one
an
that I didn't
easy
plan at all.
and if you need an easy out of a way to, like, rev that engagement, if things are, like, going awry or something's wrong and you need to, like, find a way to just, like, divert somehow, giveaways are a great way to do it. So if you have a prize you're giving
Giveaways.
away or if you can add in something extra special, like, that's a great way if you need to stall or just, like, you know, have some time or resolve something. People love giveaways. You actually want a giveaway on Donuts on Demand because you were so engaged in the show. So, you know, that's another
I actually
strategy.
won one.
You did, yeah, I know. You had
I
your choice of
did.
fanny pack or the gift card. So and it's a sick
I know.
fanny pack, y'all. If you wanna see it, it's gonna go up on our LinkedIn soon because 'cause we're asking if
Oh,
people
hell
want it
yeah.
again.
I don't know if I gave did I give a response? I
I
don't even
think
know
you
what I
did.
asked for.
I think you went with the gift card, but I don't know, maybe you're
Oh,
a
did
fanny
I?
pack person, I can't remember.
I didn't realize that fanny pack was an option. Okay, well, if I see a picture of one and it's fantastic, I will send back the gift cards for the fanny pack. Because, a good fanny pack, they're underrated for sure.
Oh, I
But
love
yeah,
fanny pack.
giveaways, huh?
Yes.
And but yet you don't force people to do a prep or a tech check. I find that sometimes the people who feel like they know the most or have done the most interviews are just like, no, because they're used to bad ones, right? They like you and I did a prep call, and you're a pro. You didn't need to do that, but it wasn't about you needing to do that. It was a couple minutes. We caught up, talked about the audience, the show, some questions, and we hung out and we went back to our work. Like it doesn't have to be a crazy
Mm-mm.
hour-long tech check. Book them
Oh,
for
no,
5 minutes or
hour-long,
something,
no. Oh, no. No, no,
right?
no.
Yeah.
30 minutes max, baby. If
Right.
that.
Right. Are there things you like to cover in the tech check?
Yeah, so my agenda for our tech checks is the first 5 minutes, just a meet and greet between the two guests and myself, because sometimes the guests won't have any context of who the other guest is. So it's nice to kind of level set, get a little
Yeah.
cheery and friendly so we can vibe when we're live. And then from there, there's about 10 or 15 minutes. I have a deck that I create that kind of goes through the show flow, tells them all the
Nice.
details on Donuts and Demand, what to expect, go through all the segments of our show. We have 5 different segments for the hour-long episode, and some of that they actually get to select their segments. So I curate
Cool.
4 different segments. They go through, they choose their top 2, and we kind of get on the same page on what each speaker is gonna kinda lean into and talk about, so there's some cohesiveness there. And then the last 5 or 10 minutes, depending on how much time we're at, we do a Goldcast walkthrough, so they know exactly what buttons to push, how to get backstage, what to expect. They can do it themselves in that moment because they
Yeah.
have their magic speaker links ready. So that's really my agenda for that tech check part.
From a SaaS perspective, that's like gold. They basically just did a demo of your platform.
Yes, it's lovely. It's wonderful. You know, it's great to be in an org where I can like
Was
use
that the
my org in
delay?
my
Did
day
the
to
delay
day and
strike
essentially
again?
sell it on my marketing. Yeah, yeah, I think so.
It did. It got crazy. We were experiencing crazy delays, and the only reason we're talking about them is because we can. On any other show, we might pretend they didn't happen. On a live show, you can, right? On a live show, you can't. You just have to, like, go with it. Have you experienced, like, crazy lag from guests?
So luckily I haven't had like lags per se, but I have had like guests like accidentally go on stage before like it starts. So we've had just like a guest like hanging out like on stage between like a session break.
On screen, right?
You
On
know,
video, just,
yeah.
like,
Hey.
eating their tuna fish sandwich on the screen.
Or, one funny moment, which it actually worked out, and sometimes these, like, goofs work out. So, someone
Yeah.
had put a question in the chat on our series masterclass episode, class 4, and Travis from PandaDoc just, like, somehow, like, brought it on stage, and he was like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry, I don't know what I've done." It's like, "Oh, no, actually, I was going to do this." So it was like you're reading my mind, and it just, like, played out well. But, yeah, people can go rogue. We've even had some session speakers sometimes when they have they have a certain level of, like, things they can do in the back end, and sometimes, they might end a session accidentally, which always
Yo,
fun when
no.
that happens.
That is a feature release, like, don't allow my guests to end the whole "Hey, thanks for coming. Okay, thanks, bye," and they end it for everyone.
Yeah, there's always, like, every once in a while, there's something funny or rogue that happens, but again, it brings that level of, like, eye-catchingness, I guess, in a way. I mean, if things are too perfect, it's
Yeah.
boring, right? So a little bit of, like,
True.
funniness and oopsies is like, "Oh, okay, I can work with this."
It's way more entertaining when things go wrong, like, as an audience member, you know? You're like, it's the polished boards, like, super script reading ones that are just terrible.
And
It's
again,
terrible.
it does depend on your audience, right? Like, there's some audiences where you probably don't wanna goof up in those ways or, like,
Okay, there.
slip up like that. If I'm giving a very high-level medical presentation to a lot of, medical, people, then probably don't want to be as goofy and funny and messing up. But I think for a lot
I'd
of
be a
people
terrible doctor.
I'm married to a doctor, so I can tell you all
Are
about that,
you?
yes. But we won't go down that road.
Okay, I was gonna say, there's a whole rabbit hole we can go to there. Um, I hadn't heard this before, and I just wanted to highlight the idea of selecting your segments, letting your guests choose their own path in a way. That is a cool idea. That is a really cool idea.
Yeah, so that came to fruition because we have actually in Goldcast history run 3 different live ongoing series. So first was CMO Diaries, which was hosted by Kishore, one of our founders. That ran, I think, for almost 2 years. We sunsetted it this year. We also run Event Marketers Live, which we've been running, I think, over like a year and a half now. Belinda, our head of community events, runs that one. And then once we started Donuts in Demand, we launched our first episode with Chris Walker and LaShonda Jackson in September. When we started thinking about how to develop this show, create this show, we were just thinking about what went really, really well with the shows we'd always produced and what we wanted to do differently or where we thought we could be better. And one thing we talked about with like EML, Event Marketers Live, was just we needed to somehow bring in some more of that, like, podcast style, like, old game show style thing where there's segments and
Yeah.
transitions and, like, just bringing some, like, freshness and more energy and liveness into it. So we actually not only, like, added this into Donuts in Demand, but we actually did an overhaul of Event Marketers Live as well and redid that
Hell yeah.
show in this style too. But the thing we wanted to avoid was how do we create a series that's engaging and informative and fun, but also doesn't become very monotonous and boring? Same old, same old. When you have a series, you want people to come back. You want to give them a reason to come back. And if it's the same thing, show to show, episode to episode, people are just going to get bored, right? They're going to drop off. They're not going to pay attention. They're not going to be engaged anymore. And so one of our ideas was, hey, what if we make this? And I have like a 20 plus segment list that I run off of. And I'm always like trying to ideate new things. I talk to my friends like over on LinkedIn and my associates in marketing of like, hey, what would you think would be a funny or cool segment to add? And then when I bring my guests into that prep call, I curate the 4 I think would match their backgrounds or their expertise or, whatever their talk tracks are. And then I give them just a very short, quick synopsis. This is what this is about. And they tell me their top 2. And then that's how we bring in some fresh flavor from episode to episode. Because we also try to ensure that we're not repeating from like one episode to the next with the same segments, because then I'm defeating the purpose.
How longs are these things? English. How long are these series?
So, on an episode basis, Event Marketers Live is about 45 minutes long. Donuts and Demand is
Okay.
an hour long. And the segments, some of them are shorter than others, like our donut dedications closes out the show before Q&A. That is really like a 3-minute max of each guest, just giving some shout outs to marketers and brands that inspire them.
Cool.
But for our kind of in the middle meteor segments, those can be like 5 to 7 minutes per speaker for those segments.
Okay. And then are these like serialized series where you're doing like a season, or you're only doing 12 and then it's done and you're doing something different, or how do you approach that?
Yeah, so all of those that I've mentioned so far, so CMO Diaries, Event Marketers Live, and Donuts and Demand have all been serialized. Currently, with the two that we have live running now, EML and Donuts and Demand, they each run once a month. So Event Marketers Live is on the first Thursday of the month. Donuts and Demand is on the second Tuesday of the month. And we run them so close together because they're very different audiences. So Donuts and Demand is very much demand generation marketers. Event Marketers Live is obviously event marketers, field marketers.
Right.
So there's not a ton of overlap in our audiences. So we can run them so close together because we're not cannibalizing our audiences so much. And then
Got it.
they just go on until we decide it's time to move on and end the show. And we've actually run them at different cadences before. I think CMO Diaries at one point was like a weekly live show, which is
Nice.
a lot. Uh,
That is a lot.
but we have found the nice sweet spot as far as like capacity, audience building, logistics, all the things is like a once a month lively show and just keeping that drumbeat in that cadence. So, like I said, EML, I think, celebrates 2 years in February, and Donuts on Demand is going into our fifth episode, I think.
Hell yeah. Yeah, 1 month does sound like a good balance between effort and audience's desire to come join something frequently. I love to just roll up the sleeves and get tactical before we run out of time and just talk about Goldcast. By the way, this episode is now sponsored by Goldcast. Wink, wink. Um, Not yet, but maybe one day. So tell me about it. Like, because we're on Squadcast right now. I'm clearly old and draconian, not live. How do I make that transition? Is it just a matter of just get Goldcast and you're good, or technology and like sort of roll up the sleeves wise, like how do I transition to doing more lives?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a mindset change because you do need to be strategic and again, how you are getting that audience engagement, how you're paying attention to your audience in the moment. So, like we've already talked about, there's thinking about what polls am I going to run? What's going to be in my survey? Am I going to use tickers on stage? How am I going to plant some things in the chat to get the chat going off a little more if it's not organically taking off? Again, if you want to do giveaways or any kind of fun games or interactive elements, there's definitely a mindset shift of you're not just getting in a recording studio and talking to someone and that's it. And granted, that's hard enough on its own, right? Like running a
Sure.
podcast is not easy. I produced this podcast for 6 seasons and hosted for 2.5. So it's not easy either. But the mind shift, I think, is different. Of there's just a whole nother level you need to think about as you're creating your run
Okay.
of show, as you're thinking about how to build your audience into your content, into your flow. So I think that's the biggest change if you're wanting to go from like a and people pre-record webinars all the time. So it's not like someone
Mm,
who's doing events isn't like having this kind of thinking either too, because there's a
sure.
lot of organizations that probably does a lot of recording for their events. And then the only part that might be live is like their Q&A or their follow-up panel or question time. But I think a big transition is just thinking about how do I up that engagement? How do I get my audience involved? How do I make it engaging for that whole hour? Because with a podcast, a lot of consumers are probably not going to sit through your podcast for that whole 30 minutes, 45 minutes, hour. They're going to pause it here and do this and then come back and then do this. And it's a different kind of vibe and feeling and engagement than like a
Yeah.
live event. I mean, yeah, a lot of them you can watch on demand and there's 100% value there. But in that moment, in that live engagement moment, what are you doing to ensure that they're not hopping off and because they can't really come back, it's going to be like 20 minutes flies and the event's done.
I definitely see the mindset you're talking about. You're right. It's not like, hey, so right now someone's listening to this and getting a run on. Hey, get your Peloton on. yeah, in that scenery, you're probably, bicycling through Bosnia and listening to this podcast and getting a workout in. And, you can go fast forward. You probably have us on 1.5 speed. Totally get it. But there's this time box of a live event. It's starting at 1, it's ending a little around 2. You have these people then and now, so tune in, but that's what you got. And afterward, maybe it's recorded, but there's a certain period of time. Do you think that recorded webinars that are pretending to be live, is that evil or is that okay? What's your take?
I am of the essence of always be real with your audience. So I don't think I would position it as like, oh, this is live. And although it is recorded, like, no one's going to
Right.
care if you're like, oh, this section has been recorded. Like, I don't think that's going to, I mean, maybe I'm wrong too. Like, maybe there's research out there that proves me wrong. But I'm always of the thinking of like, just be transparent with your audience and have them know what they're signing up for and what they're getting. There might be
Yeah.
different feelings about that. But and I'll say too, I think running things live makes you produce better content because you have to, right? Like you said, you have to
Right.
keep those people there. You have to keep them in the room. So what are you doing to do that? And there's no redos, there's no retakes. And so I think it also allows you to level up your content in a lot of ways. And then if you have a platform like Goldcast, then you can use a tool like Content Lab to then bring that content into the back end, snip it up into video clips and emails and blog posts and outlines and
Yeah.
all sorts of things. And then all of a sudden, it's not only just a live event, it's this whole continuum of like a multi-channel content strategy. So a lot of different thinking I think goes into it, but it's like how do you keep people engaged, how do you keep them in the room, and then how do you then use that content after you've gone off stage and your curtains dropped.
Man, you're right. It is another layer that makes for better content. And I could even see podcasters that aren't even going live considering this question because it's not going to make your podcast worse. It's only going to make it better. How do you get that audience in? How do you hook them early? How do you keep them going? And if your guest is getting boring, don't let them. Like you need to mix it up. Like, but like the pressure is on, like a little more pressure. I think we could use that as we get more comfortable in our podcast chairs of like getting that live mindset. Push that quality.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
it will really bring you to another level for sure. And again, it depends on how you handle that pressure and that anxiety. And for some people, it probably is the last thing they want to do. And that's okay, right? That's why
Yes.
pre-recorded things exist and why you can run a podcast in this way. But if you feel like this kind of atmosphere will help you thrive and help you be better, 100% try it. I mean, it's really like changed my ability to be a host and be a moderator and be a presenter in ways because surprise surprise, I actually don't have an event marketing background at all.
Hey.
So everyone can learn, everyone can figure it out. It takes time and effort and practice makes perfect, all that kind of jumbo.
All
But
that stuff.
if you're considering it, it's so worth it, trust me.
Hell yeah. Where do people go if they wanna connect with you, wanna get a little is there a Goldcast demo, all that stuff? Where do they go? Where do you want them to go?
Oh, I'm just a marketer who loves to sell demos. So let me tell you about where you
Hey.
can get our demos. So goldcast.io is our website. That's where you can find
Cool.
out about our platform, about Content Lab. Also, if you're just wondering how to run a live event series, I just closed out on my last big event series of the year. We have a series masterclass. It's a collection of 4 different classes all about how to create, launch, and maintain a thriving live event series. Lots of great guests too on that one. I mean, I had so much fun and they dropped lots of knowledge. And if you want to connect with me, I am a LinkedIn queen. That's my jam. I'm not a TikTok girl. I'm not really on Insta. Like, it's just, I know I'm very boring. I'm getting very old. Don't remind me. But yeah, find me over on LinkedIn, Lindsay McGuire. Don't be alarmed when you see my URL is a different last name because it's still in my maiden name because I don't know why it's too long. I've been married like 6 years, so it's
Wait,
out the window.
McGuire's the new one or the old one?
McGuire's my new one. My maiden name is Latteroo.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, Lataroo, is it spelled like it sounds or is it, like,
Ladee.
complicated?
Laderoute. So is that how you were guessing?
Oh, yeah, it's different, right? People would totally say it wrong and spell it wrong.
Yeah, I
McGuire,
was
hey, okay, all
I was
right.
happy to become a
That's funny.
McGuire, although now I'm
Yeah,
haunted by Lizzie McGuire jokes, so it's fine. It's fine.
that's
You can
true. "Oh, is she coming over for Christmas?" You're like, "No, shut up, go away. You're uninvited." Oh, that's so good. Lindsay, thank you for coming on here. I feel like this time was so short. We totally gotta chat on the marketing pod. I could hang out with you forever and eat donuts next time. But thank you for coming on here.
For sure. I do hope to see you on the chats at Donut and Demand on January 16th, and you better bring a donut because that's what it's meant for. It's meant for demand
Hell
gen
yeah.
learning and eating donuts.
I'll be there. I'll be causing trouble. I'll be trying to test out your process, see if you got a little block filter, maybe a little mute button on Casey Cheshire. He's causing too much trouble. He's too
Don't make me
entertaining in the
ban
chat.
you. I trust you're a
I'm gonna
hoot.
get
We'll have lots
banned.
of fun.
I'm gonna get shadow banned on Goldcast. Well, for those listening, if you learned something, and I freaking know you did because I literally have 2 pages of notes over here, front and back. I've learned a ton. There's so much. This letting your guests select their segments, the once a month cadence, the tech checks. I don't know how many times I have to say that. Tech checks, people. The polls. So much good stuff. If you learned something, share this episode with someone else. One person, 3 people, 9,000 people, whatever. Just but put what you learned. Tag Lindsay, tag myself. We'll hop in those LinkedIn comments. We'll throw some memes down. We'll have a great time. We'll have a great conversation. And with that, thank you again for coming on here. This has been so cool.
Oh, thank you. It was a great conversation. Had a lot of fun, and I look forward to all those memes and gifs on all the shares you're doing out there. So let's go.
Hell yeah, let's do it. All right, everyone. This has been a crazy cool episode of Creating the Greatest Show. We will see you all next time. And next time doesn't have to be next week. Life's too short, and we have way too much to talk about. Find show notes full of takeaways, lessons, and links at creatingthegreatestshow.com. For more information on launching your own podcast or working with us to produce your existing show, come on down to the big tent at ringmaster.com. Until then, friends, whatever you do, do it with all your might. Work at it, if necessary, early and late, in season and out of season, not leaving a stone unturned and never deferring for a single hour that which can be done just as well now. P.T. Barnum.